We're here to discuss the independent investigation into the officer-involved shooting of Benjamin Moralez. We'll go through the PowerPoint with what we've discovered, and then there's a short surveillance video, the only thing that shows anything around the actual time of the shooting. So that's short. We'll show that afterwards, but we'll go through the PowerPoint here first. So the investigative questions that we always ask. Question 1, was the use of deadly force result in the death of Benjamin Moralez justified? And 2, will any charges be filed against the Honolulu Police Department personnel who shot and killed Benjamin Moralez? Conclusion, the use of deadly force which resulted in the death of Benjamin Moralez was justified and no charges will be filed against the police personnel who shot and killed him. This is Mr. Moralez. These events took place in Waikiki at the Ohia Waikiki Studio Suites on Kuhio Avenue. He was in Unit 590 and in the 5th floor hallway. And so as we try to describe this, this is the room he was in. And then he moves down this corridor later. This is where the two SSD officer and corporal were who shot at him. And the surveillance camera is like halfway down the hallway, and that's the picture we have. The initial the investigation in our office was done by Family Division Chief Tiffany Kaeo. So weather outside clear, mostly sunny. That's the location you can see in Waikiki. That's the building. Now, Mr. Moralez, he moved to Hawaii from California in October of 2021. He had worked on the mainland in construction and nursing facilities. At the time of the death, he was going through a divorce. He had lived at these suites from May 30th until his death. He had gotten some money from cashing out like an annuity, so he prepaid for the several months with a cashier's check of $13,477. He told his mother he was selling weed on the street in Waikiki and in a hotel. And she said he had always used marijuana, but after he had been diagnosed as bipolar during the pandemic, he started taking medications for being bipolar, but then stopped taking that and was just self-medicating with marijuana. She said he really had become a different person in the last 6 months of his life. He'd refer to his homies and told her, I just need one more day in the hotel, and then I've got other plans. I don't want to share them with you, Mom, because you're not going to like it. His mother said that on Thursday morning, December 8, he had asked her to rent a car for him so he could live in it because his time at the Ohio was running out. She told him she couldn't take on that kind of liability. He ended the call with, never mind, Mom, I love you, goodbye. And the mom said that over the previous year, he told her he had discovered the movie Scarface and had idolized the main character, Tony Montana. He frequently told her and his younger brother that he wouldn't be taken alive or go to jail. Mom said he was just so bent on going out with people were going to know his name. Around December 2nd, when he was repeatedly asking her for money to extend his hotel stay, he told her, Mom, I'm not going to be taken alive. You're going to get a call. And he had a planned checkout date from the Ohia on December 5, but on November 22nd, his cashier's check ran out for the room, so he started paying with a credit card. On December 5, he asked to extend his stay until the 7th. And then to December 8 with a late checkout of 1 p.m. The guest services manager went at 1 p.m. to ask him to vacate. And he told her, call HPD and get them to get me out of the unit. So on December 8th at 2022 at 1:39 p.m., the guest services manager called HPD to request help in removing Moralez. She then went to Unit 590 to wait for HPD. Through the slightly open door, Moralez acknowledged her and in a calm voice said, when the officers arrived, to stand away from the doorway. Patrol Officer 1 arrived and started knocking on the door to 590 and announced his presence. HPD come to the door several times. Hotel staff reported that Moralez had told them to call HPD and make him leave and to stand clear of the door when they arrived. Around 2:01, Patrol Officer 1 heard a gunshot coming from Unit 590, and he said it sounded like kind of far away out from the balcony. Patrol Officer 1 moved to the stairwell, updated dispatch, and escorted the hotel staff that had been around the unit down to the ground floor. At about 2:07, Patrol Officer 1 went to his patrol vehicle that was parked down on Nohonani Street to retrieve his rifle. Review later on of his body-worn camera the next morning revealed a bullet hole in the passenger rear door. And given that Moralez didn't fire again after the first shot until Patrol Officer 1 reached his vehicle, we believe that the first shot and only shot was fired into his vehicle at that time. As Patrol Officer 1 was by his vehicle, he saw Moralez standing on his balcony holding a handgun. After a few seconds, Moralez went back into his room. Patrol Officer 2 arrived at Unit 590 a few minutes after that. After hearing the gunshot coming from Unit 590, he helped escort the staff to the stairwell. He then heard on the radio that a male was seen on the balcony with a handgun. To protect HPD, hotel personnel, and Moralez himself until SSD arrived, Officer 2 yelled at Moralez to stay in the Unit 590. Police, if you come out, you might get shot. Don't come out. Stay in the room. At about 3:30, SSD officers arrived and relieved him. About 2:23, SSD Sergeant 1 was assigned to assist patrol officers with what now they correctly realized was a barricade situation in room 590 at the Ohia Waikiki Studio Suites. SSD Sergeant 1 arrived at the scene and was apprised of the circumstances. He then set a react team of SSD officers down at this end of the corridor, about 40 yards from Unit 590. So you can see it's about 40 yards for the whole thing, about 20 to the half. The other units on 4th, 5th, and 6th floors were evacuated. And it was at considerable risk to the SSD officers, particularly on the 5th floor, but they wanted to get people out in case a bullet went through the walls or he came out and started shooting, that type of stuff. So they just wanted to make the area as safe as possible. And multiple attempts were made by the crisis negotiating team to make contact with Moralez to try to get him to pick up the phone so they could have a conversation. They tried to call the landline in the hotel room, then his cell phone, and then they lowered what they call a drop phone onto the balcony of his unit. And this resulted in him firing one round through the sliding glass doors out to the balcony. Continuing efforts to make contact with Moralez led to his firing more shots from inside Unit 590. At 6:26 p.m., HP used a robot. They ended up using two robots during this episode. And the first one's called a Dragon Runner. And it went down the corridor and then dropped a phone right outside the door to room 590. And the crisis response team made attempts on the other three phones, the drop phone on the balcony, the hotel landline, and his cell phone. And he did not respond to any of the phone calls. At about 8:10 p.m., they just paused efforts and tried to wait a little while to let things calm down. At about 8:30, efforts to contact him resumed. They even used the loudspeaker on the Bearcat, which is an armored HPD vehicle that would be resistant to bullets being fired, out on Nohonani Street on the loudspeaker to encourage him to answer the phone. None of that worked. At about 10:20 p.m., SSD Corporal 1 used the less than lethal rifle that they had that shoots wooden baton rounds. So this is like a baton or broom where you slice it up, and that's what gets shot. Some of you may remember years past when George Parker, who was a defense attorney and left federal court and ended up in an alley across the street saying, "You're going to have to get the sharpshooters to come and take me alive because I'm going out." And he comes running out. He had his cell phone was like a brick back then, covered his blue blazer. He came running out with it, and he got shot, and it took a tooth out. And in that similar type of weapon, less than lethal. So he fired from one of the nearby balconies that you can reach around. And after he did it, like 4 or 5 times, after the third round was fired, Moralez yelled something and fired a round from his pistol. At about 11:30 p.m., HPD used a different robot. This is called an Andros FX, to actually ram the door and try to gain entry. Because the alternative, since he wasn't talking and wasn't having any communication, would end up being the officers charging into the room. And so instead of that, they used this robot, and on the third attempt, it knocked the door down. They then used the loudspeaker on the robot to encourage him to come out safely. With a camera, they were able to scan the unit, and they didn't see him. So then they used the arm to pull down the drapes so that they could get a drone looking into the room, because they weren't exactly sure what was going on in that room. They knew Moralez was there, but they didn't know if anyone else was there. And so they pulled down the drapes, and then it was even able to remove the bathroom door with this robot. And right when that's where he was kind of barricading himself into the bathroom. And right then, at about midnight, SSD Officer 1 and SSD Corporal 2 had taken positions down here at the Mackay end of the corridor. And they both had Sig Sauer rifles. And as soon as they had knocked down the door with the robot, Mr. Moralez comes out of the unit. And he had as he came out of the unit, he had a black pistol in his right hand, and it was pointed toward the ceiling. He then turned to the left and started to walk down this corridor toward the 2 officers. And they started to yell, "Stop, drop the gun, stop, drop the gun." And you'll be able to see the surveillance camera doesn't have sound, but you can see him shaking his head side to side as he's walking down the corridor toward the officers when they're yelling to stop and to drop the gun. He kept advancing down the corridor toward the officers, ignored their repeated commands. He got about halfway down the corridor, and he just started to bring the pistol down. And as soon as he did that, both officers opened fire, and multiple shots with their rifles. He dropped down, he fell, and when you're watching the video, it's really quick. He's going, and then all of a sudden he's going down. And when he fell, he landed on his gun, and he continued to move around some. So EMS personnel attempted, hang on a second. Yeah, he'd fallen onto his gun. They told him to show his hands and move away from the gun. He was ordered to roll to the left away from the gun, which he did, and they were able to secure the weapon. The 2 officers then went to clear the Unit 590 to make sure nobody else was there, no threats were there, as the EMS folks that were there attended to Moralez. And they attempted to provide life-saving measures to him. At about 4:35 a.m., he was transported by EMS to Queens Medical Center. He was pronounced dead at approximately 1:11 a.m. by Dr. Watt. On December 9, 2022 at 11:40 a.m., Forensic Pathologist 1 conducted the autopsy on Moralez at the medical examiner's facility at 835 Evelay Road. 2 gunshot wounds. One was a grazed gunshot wound to the left side of his neck, caused injury to the skin and soft tissue. And the other was a through-and-through gunshot wound to the right thigh. It caused injury to the skin, soft tissue, and it hit the femoral artery. And it fractured his right femur. The Forensic Pathologist 1 determined the cause of death to be multiple gunshot wounds. A toxicology analysis was done, and it revealed the presence of methamphetamine, marijuana, and caffeine. Moralez had 3 traffic, this is his whole criminal history, 3 traffic infractions in Hawaii: speeding, crossing against the lights, speeding, driving without license or insurance card on person. 1, what they call a traffic crime, blue lights prohibited, no record in California. Okay, officers' use and attempted use of non-deadly force, because they always try to ramp things up and start with talking and so visibly they were in clearly marked uniforms, whether it's patrol officers or SSD officers. Multiple police department patrol and SSD officers made multiple attempts to try to get Moralez to surrender peacefully. They attempted in multiple ways to get a phone to him and to have a conversation to convince him to give up. And this continued up into the last walk he did down the hotel hallway, where the SSD personnel at the end of the hallway were telling him to stop and drop the gun. He ignored all of these commands and requests. So the analysis we always do first: use of deadly force in self-protection. That's Hawaii Revised Statute 703-304. The use of deadly force in self-protection involves 2 issues. 1, did the actors use deadly force? No question, SSD Officer 1 and SSD Corporal 2 used deadly force when they shot at Moralez. These shots were not accidents. 2, was the use of deadly force justified? SSD Officer 1's and SSD Corporal's 2 use of deadly force was justified if they reasonably believed that deadly force was necessary to protect themselves from death or serious bodily injury. And they both knew that Moralez had been firing a gun multiple times in Unit 590. Then they saw him leaving Unit 590, turn toward them with a gun in his right hand, at first pointed toward the ceiling. Then as he's walking toward them and he's ignoring their commands to stop and drop the gun, and he shook his head in a side-to-side no fashion when they're telling him this. As he got within 15 to 20 yards from them, he began moving his right hand, holding the gun down toward their direction. As such, they had a reasonable belief that using deadly force, i.e. shooting at him, was necessary to protect themselves from death or serious bodily injury. Use of deadly force for the protection of other persons. The use of deadly force for the protection of others involves 2 issues. 1, did they use deadly force? Same response. They both used deadly force when they shot Moralez, and those shots were not accidents. 2nd, was the use of deadly force for the protection of others justified? And the use of force on or toward another person is justified if the person whom the actor seeks to protect would have been justified in using such protective force, which we've already determined they were, and the actor believes that his or her intervention is necessary for the protection of the other person. Here, both SSD Officer 1 and Corporal 2 were each justified in using self-defense, and they each believed that his intervention was necessary to protect the others, so they were each justified in using deadly force in the protection of the other. And finally, use of force, deadly force, in law enforcement. And the use of deadly force in law enforcement is justified if, 1, the arrest is for a felony. And here they were assisting in this barricade situation, but they were looking, potentially at the felony offenses of reckless endangering in the 1st degree, criminal property damage in the 1st degree, for firing his gun multiple times in Unit 590, as well as the felony offense of terroristic threatening in the 1st degree for pointing his gun at them in the hallway. Second, the person effecting the arrest is authorized to act as a law enforcement officer. And here both SSD Officer 1 and SSD Corporal 2 were on duty as sworn Honolulu Police Department officers. 3, the actors believe that the force employed creates no substantial risk of injury to innocent persons. Since the occupants of the other unit on the 5th floor and the units on the 4th and 6th had been evacuated, they were confident that there was no substantial risk of injury to an innocent person. 4, the actors believe that the crimes for which the arrest is made involved conduct including the use or deadly use of deadly force, or there's a substantial risk that the person to be arrested will cause death or serious bodily injury if his apprehension is delayed. And here, he's a violent, dangerous person at this point in his life. He had fired his handgun about 10 times in the unit, and advanced in a dangerous, threatening manner toward the officers on the 5th floor. He ignored repeated instructions to stop and drop the gun. When he shoots through the sliding glass doors or through the roof or other parts in the room, that's a substantial risk. It'll hurt somebody else as well. And then starting to lower his gun in the direction of the officers, clearly they were justified in the use of deadly force in law enforcement. So, conclusion, the use of deadly force, which resulted in the death of Benjamin Moralez, was justified, and no charges will be filed. And now let's show you a short video, and we'll do it a couple of times. Okay. This really does appear to be another case of suicide by cop. The Honolulu Police Department officers present tried everything they could to have Mr. Moralez surrender peacefully. He was not interested. And he appears to have adopted kind of an outlaw mentality with this hero worship of Tony Montana in the movie Scarface, and attempted to arrange a barricade situation, as I recall how Scarface did when he went out. And he told multiple people he wasn't going to surrender. He was going to have to be killed by HPD. I thought they wisely used the robot to go into the room so the officers didn't have to charge in there, as well as pulling the drapes down and removing the bathroom door. So it defeated the barricade situation, which is extremely difficult to do with. And then when he came into the hallway and started marching down, the officers again tried to get him to give up. He shook his head. He wasn't going to do it. And then when he lowered it, as soon as it started to go down, they both shot him. And it really is a disturbing trend. I think a number of the cases we've done recently, they've been suicide by cop. And it's sad enough when a person decides to commit suicide, but when they do it this way, it makes it even worse. The officers have to live with, even though it's a justified shooting, the fact that they killed somebody. And so I'd be happy to take your questions on this. I did want to give you a little bit of an overview about these officer-involved shootings. So when I came into office a little over 4 years ago, in 2021, we inherited 5 pending HPD shootings. In the time since then, we've had 12 others. In 2 of them, the suspect was not killed, and they're pending trial. So we can't be talking about them and the facts and circumstances of the crime that would affect their right to have a fair trial. So 15, 5 plus, there are 12 new ones, 15 plus 10, 15 have been discussed this way. In one of them, we attempted to bring charges, and that was not successful in the SICAP case. There are currently 4 cases pending. And we're looking at our procedures for the future to see if we can be faster at doing this. It is a real challenge because HPD they have to go through their procedures. They get testing. The autopsies take a while, waiting for closing reports, all that. But we're trying to think of ways to be faster. Of the 4, 2 of them were from last month or June, and the other 2 were from 2024. So we will try to deal with those as soon as we can. But it's just to give you an idea of doing this. And when we came into office, we thought, for purposes of transparency, anytime an agency, if one of our investigators shot and killed somebody, we would not do the investigation ourselves. We'd ask HPD to do it. And if they thought, and if charges should be brought, then it wouldn't be by our office, it'd be by the AGs or one of the other county prosecutors. So doing this, I think we're the only agency doing these independent reviews. And that also led us to have a policy about the body-worn camera. And if we're going to have if we determine that it's a justified shooting, we'll have a press event like this, and we'll share whatever relevant footage there is. This is surveillance footage. Usually sometimes it's body-worn camera footage. If we're going to charge a police officer with a crime, we're not going to release the body-worn camera footage because it's evidence in the case. Just like DNA evidence, confessions, statements, and the like. We never reveal any of that. I know that is unhappy in some quarters, not releasing it. And I have to tell you, when we started down this path, I got on the phone to DAs around the country, and I was massively disappointed at the responses I got. They generally were, if it makes us look good, we release it. If it doesn't, we don't. I'm serious. Now, I can understand a situation where a mayor, I think there was one incident that we saw on the mainland where a 16-year-old girl was shot and killed by the police. But when they showed the body-worn camera footage, it showed that she had a knife and she was trying to stab a couple of other folks. And so the shooting was justified. But I think they were looking at a riot situation in that city. So in order to defeat that, the mayor ended up releasing the body-worn camera footage. Of course, that may be a city where the mayor runs things, with the police department. But it may be a little different in what they can do. But from a prosecutor standpoint, we have to follow the Hawaii Supreme Court's Hawaii Rules of Professional Conduct, and under trial publicity, we are prohibited from releasing information that's going to get out to the public where it could affect a future court proceeding, like jury selection. Because if we release the body-worn camera footage in a case that we're going to try to prosecute, experts on a number of the TV stations in particular, would be opining about, this was a legitimate shooting, this is a bad shooting. And that would make jury selection that much more difficult. Anyway, I just wanted to give you an idea of where we're at. Since it's second term, we're looking at all sorts of things to try to do things faster, and this is an example of one of it. But if I can answer any of your questions about the Moralez shooting. Yeah.
Just for what you just mentioned, these investigations that your office does, are your investigators going out to the scene like after these officers shoot the guy, or are they letting HPD do their investigation? HPD turns over whatever the evidence they're going to turn over, and you review that evidence, or you guys do your own separate investigation, interview witnesses, you know what I mean?
Each case is different, but in this case, that's exactly what happened. They went to the scene of the crime, and actually the deputy prosecutor went to the scene of the crime too. In this, it was a barricade situation, so it was lasting a long time. So whereas some of these other ones are going to be quick and no time for that.
But your guys will go back and re-interview the
right.
same witnesses and do all the same
and look at the physical evidence and try to compare it to. It just depends on a case-by-case basis which it seems appropriate. But our investigators have police powers, and many of them come from police departments, so it's a natural thing for them to be doing. And the prosecutors, we give these cases to the division chiefs to be looking at. And so often, they have years of experience, and they'll often sit down with other division chiefs or team captains to get their take on, what happened and how, because we got to be very careful with this. Charging police officers is a serious matter. It's part of our job. We're an independent agency. And so we'll, when it's appropriate, like we did with SICAP, we'll bring charges. When it's not appropriate, we won't. And I can tell you, it's very serious, so we're going to try to make sure we make the right call in each case.
Just to clarify, so all of this information came from your investigation, or is it a mix of both?
It's a mix. And a lot of it, the police are there. They have a crime lab. We don't have that. They have, other kinds of resources and other things to do. But it's often, which is not uncommon, is looking at the same set of facts, you may come to a different conclusion about culpability and the like. So it's a combination.
I'm not questioning that so much as that, for example, interviewing the individual police officers. Is that your investigator, or does that come from the police department's?
That typically we do not do. And I can almost guarantee you they would not be answering our questions. It's a kill fight.
Oh, I see, because they might be charged by you.
If they're, going to be potentially charged with a crime, that is unlikely. Now, a couple of these are different, because one of these cases that we're talking about is the Makaha Chase case, which has yet to go to trial. So, it's and another case where we had looked at all of this, but that case is pending trial too. So.
In this one, is there any evidence that Moralez or anybody in his life reached out to the police and said, "Hey, this guy's suicidal. He lost his wife. Wants to die by cop"? Did law enforcement have any other prior interactions with him?
Not that we know of, and it sure seemed like, Mom knew this was. But she was the one calling. I think when she saw this happen, she did reach out and call and talk to the police, and it's a tragic situation for her. Yeah.
The officers themselves, are they already back at work? This is that's up to the department. Yeah. So they wouldn't be pending as officers while waiting for your investigation.
Right. And I think, honestly, from my standpoint, the officers know when it's a good shooting and when it's a bad shooting. So that they're experienced, they've been at this, and when you have SSD and you have crime reduction unit officers, they're used to dealing with criminals all the time. So it's very businesslike. It's very, that when one of these other cases, eventually we'll be able to show you some video. It's remarkable how calm they are in dealing with vehicles trying to run them over and other stuff. It's just, and I think it's because of their type of job. So in this case, these guys were, they tried all this stuff with the robots and everything else, which I think was really smart, because that way they didn't put officers needlessly at risk.
I'm sorry, so you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, which are the two cases that are pending trial, and which are the two shootings from 2024 that are still pending?
The cases pending trial: Dion Kitzmiller and Jonathan Perkins Sinapule. And that's the Chase case.
And then you said there were also two from 2024 that are still pending?
Yes. Those are Eric Walsh and Alston Awong. And both are being worked on as we speak, and we'll be trying to finalize those as soon as we can.
So in the video, when we see the suspect go down, the movement of his arm, interpreted by the police as he's about to bring down this weapon and shoot.
Right.
It's very, very short and very, very quick in there. Was that like a key moment to look at and really think about?
Yeah, and our investigators went frame by frame. And that's when it starts to go this way. They knew he was going to shoot at him. because he had it up totally separate before that. And you can see him shaking his head when they're saying, drop the gun. They know he's talked about, killing himself. And so it was quick, but as soon as it starts to go down, that's when they open fire.
So the officers know about that?
I think at the time, well, they knew that he had told the hotel personnel, get out of the way when the officers come and they're at the door. So I interpret that to mean that he's going to be trying to engage them.
Sorry to be very specific, but I don't do these very often. These were long guns that the officers were using.
Yes.
Are those low caliber, like 22, 25 caliber bullets? That they wouldn't have knocked him down, and he would hit 2 wounds and still be able to move around and respond to commands and so on? I mean,
Well, he got hit in the leg. It broke the bone and it went through the other side of the leg. It's I mean, the rifles are so much more powerful than the handguns.
Okay, that explains it. It got an artery, so he blew it out.
That was the problem. Because even though EMT was on the scene, because it was a barricade situation, and they got onto it right away, I think he was uncooperative in the ambulance and struggling with people, and so that may not have helped his physical condition. Okay, well, thank you all very much.